Hey, welcome to another Miata video. If you watched the last episode, you saw me put on these beautiful new wheels and tires. But it made me realize something. My old brakes are kind of ugly. So we can't have that. So in this video, I'm going to be doing a aesthetic brake upgrade. I mean, if they work better afterwards, that's cool too. But let's be honest, it's really for looks. So I'm going to be putting on some beautiful new rotors, upgrading my pads, putting some stainless steel brake lines on, and most importantly, I'm going to spray paint my calipers red because that'll make the biggest improvement in stopping distance. Also, unexpectedly, I'm going to be replacing the front hub and wheel bearing assemblies. And this should be a nice, satisfying upgrade, so let's take a break. That was really dumb. As most of my projects start out, let's put a little penetrating oil on the things we're going to be breaking loose. I'm going to start by removing the brake lines, and this little clip just pries off. And then you can use a couple wrenches to loosen the brake fitting. It really helps to have line wrenches so you can get a better grip on that fitting and not round it off. You also want to have something to plug the brake line with right when you take it off. So I used a rubber vacuum cap and tried to slip it over the end of the brake line as quick as I could, but still makes a little bit of a mess, so it's important to clean up all the brake fluid because it's pretty corrosive. Then the caliper side could come out. Just want to make sure to get these copper washers out. We'll want to replace them along with the new lines. Next, I started to remove the caliper by cracking loose the slider bolts. So going into this project, I thought I was just going to rebuild these calipers myself, clean them up, replace the seals, and so on. But the more I look into them, the more I see that I should replace them, so we'll see more of that in a little bit. Next, I could pop out the old brake pads, which actually still have a lot of life left in them. Then I could pry the old clips out and remove the caliper mounting bracket from the spindle. With that out of the way, the brake rotor can just slip right off. Rinse and repeat on the other side. Next, I started to inspect the old parts. These mounting brackets would be easy to clean up. These rubber grommets can be removed, and it's just a matter of cleaning and painting. The calipers, on the other hand, look a little rustier than I expected, and there's holes in the dust boots. I need to pop the piston out so I can get a look inside the bore, and that'll help me decide whether it's rebuildable or not. First, I had to look up a video of how to pop out the pistons. Never done this.
But if you only have hand tools and you don't have compressed air, ain't no way that you're going to get the piston out any other way.
Hold my beer. Sure. Yes, it's true. As long as you have a little tapered adapter like this that will fit inside the hole where the brake line goes, you can use a bicycle pump to gradually pump the piston out. Yeah, it's a little awkward and takes a bit, but it works. Something much easier is something like an electric tire inflator. I'm using the same little adapter and it makes short work of popping the piston out. This piston looks pretty gnarly, and maybe it would clean up alright, but looking inside the bore, it looks pretty pitted and rusty, so I don't think this is a good candidate to rebuild. So I bit the bullet and bought a pair of rebuilt calipers. They're pretty affordable. So then I was looking at my filthy dust shields and thinking I would really like to clean them up, which requires removing the hubs. So since I was ordering stuff, I went ahead and ordered new hubs and bearings too. So to remove the old ones, you have to destroy the dust caps. I don't think there's a way to take them off without ruining them. Then you can unstake the hub nut with a flat punch. And use a 29mm to crack it loose. If you don't already own a long breaker bar, this is your chance to buy one, because this is a great way to break a torque wrench and show you what not to do. You should really never use a torque wrench to break loose really tight bolts like this, so this was a learning moment for me. Needless to say, I bought a breaker bar for next time. Anyway, the hubs should pull off. Sometimes they might need some persuasion. And in this case, it left half of the bearing race behind on the spindle. So I'll have to deal with that. But for now, the dust shield just screws off. To get this bearing race off the spindle, I cleaned the grease off of it and just grabbed it with vice grips, and it worked it off. Then using a bit of brake clean, I could clean off the old crusty remnants of grease on the spindle. It's probably a good thing that I decided to change these. Now it's on to the other side. If you're replacing the hubs, you pretty much have to resign yourself to buying new dust caps, because basically I have to destroy them to get them off. It's also a good idea to order new hub nuts. Since my torque wrench was already broken and I hadn't gotten my breaker bar yet, I just went ahead and used it again. This side just pulled right off. Not sure why, but that's how it's supposed to go. This bucket of goo is the same evaporust that I used during my Opal suspension project, so it's still good. I left the dust shields in there for about 24 hours, and they came out pretty clean. All this grime you see just wipes right off. After rinsing and wiping them off with a cloth, this is how they look. Pretty clean. I just gave them a quick scuffing and a wiping down with wax and grease remover, and gave them 3 coats of VHT chassis black. I let them dry for a couple days because I was still waiting for parts anyway, and put them back on the car, and what a difference that makes. Couple days later and new parts are here. These are the new front hubs and bearings and the new hub nuts. I'm going a little bit overkill here and coating the bare metal surfaces with a bit of fluid film. I don't really want these to instantly turn into rust, so hopefully the fluid film will keep them looking decent for a while. Before installing the new hubs and bearings, we need to put a thin coating of grease on the spindle. And finally the new hub nuts could go on. By this time I had gotten my new torque wrench, which was also from Harbor Freight, but nicer. Finally, we can stake this nut using any kind of flat punch. Just hammer it into the notch to make sure this nut stays put. And of course, repeat on the other side. The finishing touch is to install these new genuine Mazda dust caps. Alright, I just got my rebuilt calipers in the mail. They're pretty cheap, so I think it's well worth it. I just have to send my cores back in. But as you can see, they come painted this sort of gray color, and they're kind of covered in an oily film. So what I'm going to do is split these halves apart, because I also don't want to paint over the hardware because that's kind of tacky. I'll clean these up, give them a light scuffing, mask off some things, and paint them with some red caliper paint for performance. Let's go. So after splitting the two halves apart, I made the call to remove the dust seals because I thought I could do a better job painting with them out of the way. It turned out to be pretty annoying to reinstall, but we'll see that later. I took some time to carefully mask everything off and then scuffed everything down with Scotch-Brite. Lastly, a wipe down with some wax and grease remover, and these are ready to paint. I took these over to the trash can paint booth and hit them with 3 coats of duplicolor red caliper paint. We'll see how well it holds up, but it is designed for high heat and brake dust and all that kind of stuff, so we'll see. After letting these fully dry for a couple days, I could do the satisfying job of unmasking them. Reinstalling the boots for the slider pins is pretty easy. This one just pops on. I like to spin these things around to make sure they're fully seated. On the other side, I found the best way to get it back through was to use a blunt instrument like a paintbrush that fits inside and just push it through. Now on to the dust boots for the pistons. This will be helpful for those of you that are rebuilding your own calipers. At first I thought I could get it back in with the piston in place, but there's just not enough room to work that outer lip back into the caliper. So what I had to do was pop the piston out, work the seal into place, and then flip it around so that the outer lip is hanging off the end of the piston. Then I could work it into position inside the groove in the caliper, rotating it as I go, and you can use the pick tool to help guide it into the groove. It definitely takes some finesse, but once it's finally in there, you can push the piston all the way down and it should snap into place without lifting out of the caliper. It's a good idea to push the piston all the way down anyway, as it'll make it easier to install over the new brake pads. Finally, these are about ready to go on, but if you notice how much paint I got inside the threaded holes, I'm going to need to clean those out. So I used a wire brush on a drill to make sure all the threaded holes were nice and clean. At last I can reveal my new rotors. These are some beautiful slotted rotors from DBA, or Disc Brakes Australia. Obviously they look quite a bit nicer than my old ones, and I like that the centers and the edges are painted, so they won't rust. Before we put them on, we need to clean off the braking surfaces. You'd be surprised how much junk is on there. Now I can slip these new rotors on and get ready to put the mounting brackets on. I've I've already installed the new pad clips, so it's just a matter of installing and torquing the mounting bolts. Okay, let's talk about brake pads. I decided to go with EBC Red Stuff pads. They're a well-respected company that's been making performance brake pads for a long time, and they have all these different compounds ranging from race car to street, and they're all color-coded. So they have yellow stuff, blue stuff, green stuff, red stuff, etc. So I carefully looked down the specifications and everything and chose the red ones because they met my specific criteria, which is that they're red, so they'll match the calipers. That's, you know, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, so they should be great. I'm putting just a little bit of copper grease on the tabs of these brake pads where they slide inside the clips, just to make sure they're quiet. Yeah, just like that. And as you can see, these have these shims on them already that are kind of rubberized, so I don't think we need to put any grease on them. Last but not least, these little clips here that spread the pads apart and help keep them from vibrating. There's also a wear indicator clip that goes in the middle somewhere, and its only job is to start screeching when these get down thin. Those are optional. I think I'm going to leave those out. Okay, we're about ready to put our beautiful calipers on. But first, got to make sure to lubricate the slider pins. So for that, you want to use some proper brake grease. This is like a silicone grease for exactly this kind of thing, where these slip into these rubber sleeves. And then slide it in. Nice. Squeeze the pads together. Look at that. Beautiful. Okay, now I just need to lubricate the bottom one and put it in. Have to make sure this little rubber grommet is seated correctly and this slider is all lubricated so it can slip in there, push in. Nice. Now we can actually tighten these. One of the most helpful things you can do is turn your wheels to make it easier to access the backside of these. Other than that, it's just a repeat. Inevitably, I got a couple chips in the paint, so I just dipped a brush in the same paint that I sprayed and tried to touch it up a little. Last but not least, new brake lines. These are Technofit stainless braided lines from Miata. They come with new banjo bolts and crush washers, and they should give us a little bit of a firmer pedal. To start with, we'll put our new crush washer on the bottom side and install the banjo bolt and second crush washer. Just pay attention to what angle the brake line is coming off of. These don't have the little locating pins that the old ones did, but I remember that they are perpendicular to the caliper. Don't want to tighten them too much, but about 18 foot-pounds is what the shop manual recommends. It's best to reattach the hard line second, so you're minimizing the mess. Break out the line wrench again, snug this down, clean up any residual brake fluid, install the clip, and that's pretty much it. The next day, I convinced a friend to help me bleed the brakes so I could get all the air out of the lines. With that done, I just made sure to top off the brake reservoir with some fresh fluid, and I think we're done. I was excited to see how these new brakes would look behind my wheels, so I went ahead and threw them back on to make it a functional car again. Well, I think that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to do the rear end in the next one, but I'm really happy with how this is turning out. It looks amazing, really complements the new wheels nicely. No idea if the braking is actually any better. I haven't driven yet, but the looks are really what was most important to me. So as long as I don't die, but I look good, that's mission accomplished. Anyway, stay tuned for the next episode where I'll tackle the rear. Probably going to do the hubs and bearings back there as well. Should be some unique challenges, so we'll see how it goes. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button. I noticed 90% of you guys watching aren't subscribed, so I don't know what you're doing. But take a second and hit that button, would you? Thanks. Anyways, see you next time. Thanks for watching.